It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Invite everyone to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kathy, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Jim Dombeck.
Here.
Steve Nelson.
Here.
James Shiloh.
Here.
Julian Davey. Here. Jeff Jacobson.
Here.
Eric Jones.
Present.
Kristen Wren. Here. Quorum's present.
Are there any changes to the agenda as proposed? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as proposed?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Shiloh.
Yes.
Davey.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Wren.
Yes.
Dombeck.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Is there a motion to approve the NIA consent agenda as proposed?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Davey.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Wren.
Yes.
Shiloh.
Yes.
Dombeck.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Audience to visitors. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who would like to address the board?
Oh my God.
Okay, we'll move on then to communications, correspondence, and informational items. Letters and newsletters. Quite a few.
I added.
Quite a few. Happy to see the credit rating increase, though.
What was that?
Said happy to see the credit rating increase, though.
Oh, yeah. Good news.
Ouch. FOIA requests?
I think we had a couple, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions on those? Looks like we're good on responding to those. Committee reports.
I got a couple. SEF Grant Committee met today. Mr. Wilder was there with us, and we had 3 grants. So at our meeting next Monday evening, we'll have 3 grants to review at that time. And then Planning and Zoning met last night. First time we've met in person in a long, long time. And we had 2 action items, 1 workshop item. The first action item was actually changing zoning from manufacturing to commercial for the property that is just west of where Blackhawk's truck parking is, right there. They've been operating as an antiques place for quite some time, so kind of formalizing that process. There hasn't been any industrial interest in that property in many, many years. So we did make that adjustment, recommendation to the council. The second one was related to the Park District, so they're continuing the Great Western Trail. And there's a piece of property at Page and Pleasant, which is kind of back by the silos in that area there, that the city helped the Park District by acquiring that through a long process with IDOT. And then they have subdivided it into 2 lots. The city is keeping the larger of the 2, which slightly larger of the 2, that they'll use for some storage for public works and what have you. And then the other section will then obviously allow extension of the trail to get them that much farther west. That was one of the larger sticking points in getting through that area. So we cleaned that up. And then the workshop item was actually for some housing developments at Freed and Brickville. So there's that one corner where the gravel's at, where the crossing guards kind of park and stand right there, right near North School. And there's been proposals in the past for multifamily homes there, as much as I think 12 or 13 units at one point. This is not that at all. It is a 6 single, almost acre size, half acre size lots, standalone housing. And then the back section would be natural prairie and wetland, taking the drainage that it already does get
I was
from.
going to say, how are they going to deal with that?
They've run their
Off in the lake there.
Yeah, they've run their calcs and they're going to still take all that. And there's also some runoff that comes under the road from North School, a portion of it.
Yes.
That I asked about, that they would accommodate. There'll also be walking paths connecting up to the school, to the bike path and everything that's already there.
Cool.
And Ken Nelson is actually the developer is looking at doing it. So it was just a workshop to show what he was hoping to do, that engineering had approved the preliminary calculations at this point, but they still have the next steps to go to. But it's much less dense, and there were a couple people that did speak in support of it because it was less dense and was addressing drainage issues. So he's not relying on any of the existing tiles there. Those will just be a benefit.
That's good.
So it'll be all new drainage in that area. So finally, some things to talk about. And some benefits that North School will probably see from that as far as
Do you know
growth
which
and
way
pathway.
the water will flow then? Will it flow away from North School?
So he's going to crest the front third of the site for the houses. So about the front third will now drain directly, because it all kind of sits into that swale.
Right.
Will drain out onto the road and get into the normal system. And then the backside will continue to be a retention pond.
But it'll be across the road from North School then?
Yes. Yes.
Water?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct. And that pond will actually potentially, by calculation, be holding slightly less water because the front half of the housing property will obviously push the water towards the road as opposed to settling it all in there. So still takes the water from Maple Terrace, still takes water from North. So, and they intend that, this time of year it'll be wet. In the fall, periods will be wet. Most of the time it'll be fairly dry, and it'll be natural prairie grass. So they don't intend on mowing all of it, just the properties and along the pathways. So that's all I got.
Interesting. Other committee reports?
Eric and I attended another finance subcommittee meeting, and we continue to talk about all things budget, and then also how to disseminate that information both to the rest of the board and to the public. Other things you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think that was it. Started talking about, I think we've got all the different contracts are up for renegotiation, so that process is started, at least with one group, and I think we'll hear more about that in executive session. Yeah, Nicole's been looking at a couple of different ways of kind of what some other districts around the country are doing as far as disseminating the fiscal responsibility of the district to the community at large. So some discussions and some examples of some formats that she's come across that she likes and how we might best get that out to not only the district people, but also to the community at large, and perhaps how that could incorporate with some of the other taxing bodies in town, maybe as part of a bigger package of how Sycamore is fiscally responsible.
Any other committee reports?
Citizens Advisory Council met last Thursday in person at North Grove. We spent the time pretty much on two specific topics, first being the IDEA Committee. Mr. Wilder just kind of gave us an overall update for the group in general. I know we've talked about it a little bit at board retreat and things like that, but we just had some good conversation in regards to what the school district is doing, and then got some parent feedback and kind of got to learn about the backgrounds of a lot of the parents that are in there, and just possibly some opportunities if they should arise where their background can maybe fit in for being able to help out or volunteer their time in different ways. So that was a really good conversation. And then the second half of that meeting was really surrounded around planning for the upcoming school year. So we spent, I'm sure we'll hear a lot about that tonight, but yeah, just, we've got a wide variety of parents that are on there. So it's not just, you get varying opinions of different topics and different input and different insight that I think can be shared, and, you can all kind of hear each other's perspectives, and just a lot of good information. Obviously, as we've talked about, Mr. Wilder said, the goal is to return 5 days in person at the start of the next school year, and getting back to that normalcy, and what does that look like, and, does it look perfect 100% back pre-COVID? Probably not exactly, but darn close. So just circling around all those topics and having just a good overall conversation and getting feedback, and spending time doing that.
Great. Thank you. Other committee reports?
Old North Grove School, just working on repairs to the building, the window repairs, exterior trim, exterior paint. They're trying to figure out ways to get new members to join the group. And all the events, they usually have open houses, different parts of the year. They're all on hold due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it for that group.
So the windows are all boarded up now, right?
Yeah, they're working, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do and who they're going to hire. And
Any other committee reports? Well, thank you. Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see everybody. I'll start the superintendent's report by turning things over to the high school. It's the high school's turn to present tonight and share some information about how their school year has gone as they're making their way. Just want to review our, ahead of myself there, our mission, empowering all learners to succeed in their world. Our vision, providing an ideal learning experience where students and staff are engaged and want to come back the next day. Our core values, honesty, trustworthiness, integrity, equality, empathy, respect, citizenship, digital citizenship, responsibility, and collaboration. And the 5 questions that our PLCs, our professional learning communities, ask and discuss. What do we want students to know and learn? What do students want to know and learn? How will we know if they have learned it? What will we do if they don't learn it? And what do we do if they already know it? And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Carlson in the high school.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for asking me to come tonight to speak. My report's going to kind of go from difficult or different to good. Just talk about our year and review a little bit, but also kind of, review things that have been out of our control. In my 19 years as being an administrator, this is probably the most different, and I try to use that different rather than difficult, because I think those are 2 separate things. But the difficult part we have had, whether you're aware of it, in the last 16 months at the high school, we've lost 2 students, 2 staff members, a sibling of a student, and several parents. So you're in a pandemic where kids don't get the support they normally need, that we're not able to grieve and mourn on top of all the other changes. So in a normal school year, that's not normal to have the loss we had and have to deal with it. So that's kind of the lens I look perspective-wise on why I say it's a different year versus a difficult year. I think the loss of students is very difficult. Things we've had to go through are very different. So, but very, very unique, and in some people's cases, it was a difficult year. When I look at our teachers, they've had to work very, very hard, had a very difficult learning curve, and I'll tell you right now, they're very tired. I can see it in their eyes walking in the halls, that this has been a difficult year for many of them. Their learning curves and challenges, they had to learn new technologies. We were very fortunate going into this that we were one-to-one. That gave us a step above some of the other schools. They had to learn very quickly with not much preparation. Canvas was supposed to be a 3-year rollout for us, became a 3-week rollout. They did a marvelous job in learning that. Pedagogy, they have not been taught by how to teach remote, how to teach parallel. None of the universities were teaching our teachers how to teach in that methodology, so they had to basically invent it as they went. So not only did they have to teach in that method, they had to continue to learn as they went through the whole process. The medical aspect, they had to become experts on wearing masks, why, cleaning, sanitation, social distancing, awareness, all the things we all had to go through. They had to do it in a job situation. Big part, mental health, not only for our staff, but for our students and for our parents and for our community in general. It's a difficult time, a different time. They had to become adaptive. They had to become resilient. I go back to, I had written on my whiteboard in my office before the start of the school year, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Safety is one of the top 3 needs. So teachers needed to feel safe coming to work. Students needed to feel safe coming to work. So very important. Some people had to make a very difficult decision about vaccination, and then obviously learning to respect other people's opinions and beliefs. So I think that was tough on teachers, something that obviously we're all going to remember. But if I go to the next slide with students, same learning curve and challenges. They had to learn Canvas. They weren't exposed to that. Fortunately, kids tend to pick up technology pretty easy because they are true digital citizens. The kids that we have now, they grew up with technology. They had not learned how to learn in remote or parallel models, so they had to adjust how to go through that. Never been taught or learned in that format. Some kids were very successful, some kids struggled. Again, they had to go through the same medical concerns. Kids have the same mental health issues. We talked to our local providers. They are stacked. They don't have room for more kids right now. Some kids are having a very difficult time with this. And again, students in the community. Our failures are triple normal, which we'll talk about in a minute. But some traditionally successful students are struggling in this model. And again, for a 15 to 18-year-old, they have to learn how to respect different beliefs, which again, it's a great lesson for them, but a very difficult lesson for them at this time of their life. One thing we all talk about, grades are permanent at the high school. I think that's where one of the stressors come, that they know this is when we talk to freshman orientation, we always tell them that, hey, the grades you earn first semester of your freshman year of high school are on your transcript for life. So the students know that. So when they struggle and things don't go well for them in this model, I think they panic a little bit, leads to more mental health issues, doesn't lead them to be more successful. So there are some students who excelled in this model though too. When we look at our failure tracking, we have about triple normal, if you can see the chart. But you will see in the yellow, we're back face-to-face, and as we're adding intervention period with the students, you're starting to see our failures drop, which I can believe will continue to drop. That's the value of us being face-to-face, is the teachers are able to work with the kids one-on-one. The teachers, more importantly, probably develop relationships. A lot of these kids will do anything a teacher asks once they develop a relationship, but it's very difficult to develop a relationship through a computer screen. So our freshmen who have never had a teacher, or another student who never had that teacher and don't know that teacher, I think it's very difficult for them to develop relationships and the rapport and to get those kids to work hard for the teacher. So, but I think being back face-to-face is going to make a big, big difference in the success of students. And again, our data usually bears that out. When we look at our grade tracking, you'll see that 46% of our grades are A's. So a lot of our students are doing great. They're doing fine. Right now, 13% of our grades are F's. That's again about triple of where we normally are. When I start saying we went from difficult to good, you're going to start seeing the good, that more and more students are being successful. I've had to have parents email me and say, hey, the remote model was fine for my child. They're being successful. They're doing okay. Sometimes we hear the negative and we don't hear the positive, but parents have reached out and said, listen, this is good for my kid. It's okay. We're doing all right. More positive, we just got done with the KISH placement test, round 1, and 94% of our kids tested into credit-bearing classes, into the dual credit classes for next year. That's not our test, that's KISH's test. So how they're receiving their curriculum, whether it's online or hybrid or face-to-face now, 4 days a week, the kids are able to be successful taking a objective test that's going to help them get into dual credit classes. We already have more students registered for dual credit classes than ever. We added U.S. history. So kids are being successful in that sense. Kids are still going to take rigorous classes. We also found out today that we have 33 Illinois State Scholars, which is excellent. So again, kids were successful. Some successes in different times. First group I want to present is our orchestra with Mr. Ken Tanaki. They were #1 in state in this, again, different time. And I've always said that when people want to know how good our music program is, when you go to do an teacher evaluation, it's different going into an English class versus going into a music class. But I said, I walk out and I see that trophy case, I can tell you what we do in music is done very, very well, even though it may look very different than an English class or a social studies or a math class. So I want to present Mr. Ken Tanaki.
I'll go on my toes. No, just congratulations to really should be placed on the students. What you see, what we're a part of is so to speak, a subdivision of the music championships by IHSA. We are graded on 2 levels of competition. The first one is what we call the solo and ensemble competitions, what this is we're looking at tonight, where students made videos of themselves playing a piece and small groups of 3 to 4 students together. And then actually due on Thursday is the organizational part, where we're trying to make videos of our band, orchestra, and choir programs, and they will be judged. And once they combine those scores, an actual state champion will be declared. which we are currently standing in the top 3. So hopefully we'll be back here with more good news in a month. But in this case, our subdivision is the solo and ensemble competition. And I really want to stress, because of our learning situation, is that these students had to learn 100% of the credit should be placed and given to these students here. Because half of my orchestra was remote when we started this process, they basically had to teach themselves the music. They would send me some videos. I would give them some feedback. But for the most part, they had to do this all themselves. They had to record themselves, make a video, and then I would submit all these videos to IHSA, where they would be judged by another music educator. And they had to do that all by themselves because of our inability to be really hands-on, the teachers to be hands-on in the process. So, I appreciate all the recognition and kudos from the community the last couple of weeks, but I just want the school board, everyone in the Sycamore community to realize that this was 99.9% all the students doing the work. So a credit to them. So.
Can you introduce the students that you have?
Pardon?
Can you introduce these students that you have?
Yeah, right here we have.
Let us know what instruments they play.
I'll let them introduce themselves.
Oh, great.
Better.
I'm Erin Templin, and I play violin.
I'm Emily Preble, and I play the violin.
Well, congratulations to you.
So again, it's one of the ways, obviously, you bring pride to your school. A lot of times it's the recognition for outside activities, not always the stuff that seems to happen all day long people don't see. We did have an art video for tonight, but the format did not work, so I will make sure that you get that. Art had, again, a different year. You talked to Dawn and talked to Joe McCormick and Aaron DeWitt and talked a lot about how kids express themselves and their feelings going through COVID. So I want to make sure that you get that and have a chance to share that with the community also. So we'll get that reformatted for you so that so you get a chance to see that. But again, it's interesting how those kids express themselves going through this last year. Athletics, I would tell you for the most part, now when we get to athletics, that we performed as we have, that we've had success. Boys basketball is 4th in conference. I'm not going to read all those to you, but you can see what their successes were, and we've continued right now to open the spring sports up. Baseball and softball and girls soccer have all started going now. So once we got going and through the pandemic and the ones that were sports that were allowed to play in the fall and the winter, we did very, very well. Ag department, they're going to be doing their presentation in a minute, so I'll not steal their thunder. They were part of my presentation, and they got pulled out. So, future, looking at summer school. Last year during the pandemic, we had 288 students participate in summer school. So that was by far probably our highest number ever. Majority of those kids are there for acceleration. They're trying to take classes so they can open up their schedule the next year. So if they can take speech, and then they could take another elective. So 0 hour in summer school have allowed our kids to take more and more electives. So we may have to change the format a little bit because we're going to probably have to do some bridge programs for some kids who have gaps, who weren't successful in the formats we've been in. So we're looking at that. Obviously, I know Mr. Wilder's going to talk about next year. I won't talk a lot about that. One thing I'm concerned about next year is rebuilding school culture. I've always thought we have a really good school culture, especially our student culture. I always say the quality of your school year is based on your senior leadership, but this year's juniors didn't really have a chance to see the seniors lead. They've got 9 weeks of them. Our freshmen this year have only been here for 9 weeks. They don't know where they're supposed to sit in a pep assembly or how they're supposed to behave at a football game, and literally how do you walk down the halls, who goes on the right, who goes on the left, all those type of things. And next year's freshmen obviously won't have that. So part of my concern is half our school doesn't have an established culture, so we need to make sure we work really hard at reestablishing that culture. Some things that I hope stay. I hope that remote learning opportunities, I know, again, Mr. Weiler's going to talk about this from my personal opinion, is there's some of our kids who have been really successful. Some of our kids who have social anxiety, who don't fit into a school. I dealt with a student today who just, this isn't a good place for him. His person's fine in another environment, but this is not the environment. It's not, we pound the round peg in the square hole sometimes. You can't figure out why it won't work. Everybody's different. I think our school is good for about 70 to 80% of our kids, but there's something else that'd be needed for about 20% of our kids. So, and the tech innovations, the stuff teachers have learned, I'm sure will continue on. End of the year activities, we're having a homecoming as much as we can. Right now, they did paint the town. We will have a king and queen in court at the football game on Friday. We have worked with the health department, and we are planning a prom for May 15th. It'll look different because there won't be dancing, but it'll be formal. We want to do a grand march and televise it so parents and grandparents can see that, see the students dressed up. We will not have dinner, so students, if they're going to have dinner, will go out on their own and then come. We'll put students in pods of 6 to 8 people in a group, kind of like when they go to prom over at NIU. They usually 8 students to a table. They'll just have to stay with that pod for contact tracing purposes and have about 25 activities they'll rotate throughout the night. Senior awards nights will be virtual, and graduation I'm going to talk about next. We visited with NIU today, a little bit of a change on that. We will be at 5 p.m. Sunday, May 30th. We can have 1,600 guests instead of 1,900. We could have 1,900 if we want to put people behind the stage. I don't think that's a really good seat. But we can have 5 tickets per family, which normally would give everybody 5 tickets and then let them purchase the extra. If we have extra, we'll make those available for some people if we can. We surveyed the senior class, and 77% of the students said they wanted a singular graduation. We first sent out that we would do 2 here, surveyed them. Northern had an opening, and I would tell you the expense at Northern is not that much more than it will be for what we normally spend doing graduation here. So I think it's kind of a win-win. The seniors are going to get together. We'll try to have the campus set up, so if students want to come take pictures on campus afterwards and those type of experiences, or they'd come back and under the Sycamore's been good to me sign and those type of things that they've traditionally do, that those would still be available before and after graduation, so they can have as normal experiences as they can. Mr. Wilder's going to talk about some of these concerns going forward. I know some of those, we just asked our department chairs what their concerns were, so I'm going to let him address those in his next presentation. The change is inevitable and growth is optional is a sign I had on my desk for probably 15 years. And obviously, I've long said, just watching what's happened in general in life, how ma and pa stores were wiped out by box stores are getting wiped out by Amazon, that something's going to shift education. We didn't know this was going to be it. This probably wasn't the way we'd want it to shift, but it got shifted, and it's probably going to be, some of those shifts are going to be permanent. The thing I've always wanted was every kid to have a student to have an online class. That happened. It's not the way we want it to happen, but it happened. We always say we're all lifelong learners. We are now, I'll tell you that, every one of us. And I still think choices in training are important for our future. I still think that choice for some students to have options to learn in a different format, I still think is good. And training is huge. To be able to continue to train our staff to make them better is really important. So I want to end by just saying, kudos to our teachers. They work very, very hard. They're the backbone. They're the ones that make things work. It's been, for them, some of them, a very difficult year, for some a very different year. But again, I will tell you, they're tired, they've worked hard, they've done their best, they've kept making adjustments as we've gone forward. And they're like everybody else. Sometimes they're okay with it, and sometimes they weren't, and that's okay, because that's human nature, that we're all different, and they're going to express that differently. But I think that's one of the things that I hope I'm good at, is listening to feedback from people, and if they need to come in and just vent, come in and vent, and let me know that they don't like it. And kudos to the board. I had a law professor, Rob Cooper, who was a teacher, administrator, law professor at NIU, when we went through our Type 75 program. And he always talked about the school board is the last true democratic process that we have in America where you can actually make a difference, where a person can come stand up here and tell you their opinion, maybe influence you, can reach out and talk to you directly face to face, can help mold policies. I can't go to the Senate, I can't go to Congress. People aren't going to listen to me, but he kept talking to us about that the school board is the last place where you truly can have an impact in your community. So kudos for you to taking part in the true democratic process, and probably the last place that a general citizen can come and actually voice an opinion and make it listened to and may exact some change. So, questions?
Yeah, Tim, just want to thank you on behalf of the board for all the work that you've done, as well as the staff. I know it's been a challenging year on many respects. And also a big thank you for thinking differently on graduation. I think one single ceremony is what this community needs more than anything now. A unifying ceremony to celebrate graduation, their next step of life, and anyway, thank you very much for all that as well.
Yep, thank you.
Tim, can you talk more about prom? Is it going to be here?
Yep, we'll be here at the high school in the field house.
Okay.
Yep, so we'll do a grand march. Our belief is we'll line students up out here, grand march them on a red carpet through the main gym so we can have a camera, and then they'll go down to the field house and be put into their group from there.
Nice.
As many activities, depending on the weather, we can have outside, we'll have outside. We'll have the garage doors open, we'll have, the other doors open. We've worked with the health department, and they're comfortable with that plan.
Yeah, great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks. Okay, did you put all of them right here? Okay. Hello, thank you for having us. I'm also short. I'll also stand on my tippy toes because I can't see Mr. Wilder. We're here to talk in a couple different capacities tonight, what's going on. And as department chair, with me, I'll have Courtney Wiedemann speak. She's new this year. She was our addition. She got hired in the middle of a pandemic. We interviewed her from Oklahoma, where she was student teaching at the time in the middle of a pandemic. So she got hired in a non-traditional way. And then Christian's going to speak a little bit as well. This is his second year here. And then I also have my student teacher here tonight, PJ Felix, who has actually accepted a job for next year already in Rich Central School District. So anyway, so there's a couple of us, and then my students will speak as well. Hold on, I'm going to start with these, and I'm going to come back, or should I do this first? It doesn't matter. Okay, so our community relationships, I still think this is super important, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I hated asking people to do things this year, right? Because I felt like everybody was like iffy about coming in, iffy about speaking. I know people got busy again, and then I just didn't know where we were going to go. Well, here is who we have had come speak to Ag Academy so far. So we've had a wide range of people that have either done via Zoom, using the boardroom that we have just around the corner, or have come in person. And so some of them are former graduates, which is nice when they come back. Some people reached out to us. Dave Kelly and Jerry Gunty reached out to us from DK Metals. They're really looking for young kids to work. So they said, hey, can we come in and talk to your kids? Perfect, yes, we love that kind of stuff. They want graduates from the high school. They told us what they were looking for. We already had a kid the day after go over and apply. And that's the kind of relationships that we love. We want more of that, and we're trying to get our name out there so people do that more. With me tonight, I will have my Ag Academy kids come forward first, and they'll just talk a little bit about what they're doing next year, their job shadows that we still have been able to do, and a little bit about my class. Two of them are actually going to be doing it remotely because they are at home and couldn't be with us in person, but I thought it was important for them to be included as well. So Tyler Ekstrom and Morgan Fiddler will be in person or on Zoom at home to talk. And then we'll go on to the next ones. Who's going first? Come on, kids. All of you come up. They're so scared. Come on. Usually it's in a room full of a whole bunch of people. I guess Jackson. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Hello, I'm Jerry Clausen. I am currently enrolled in Ms. Pointer's class. This class has taught me a lot of things, life skills, budgeting, and even taxes. It's something that I'm going to use for the rest of my life. Growing up on a farm, I use this every day anyways, so it's just a nice, helpful reminder that I'm going to use for the rest of my life. This fall, I'm going to go to Kishwaukee Community College. I'm going to study agribusiness, go there for 2 years, and hopefully go back to the farm to continue my future, and hopefully build the farm up and make sure that I have these life skills to help me for the rest of my future.
And where are you job shadowing?
I'm job shadowing Steve Feuerbach. He's a vet in Sycamore, and I'm working right now with a feed specialist over at Huber's Feed in Creston. Good? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jaden Slutz, and next year I'll be attending Kishwaukee Community College, and at Kish, I will be studying nursing. and then I'll go on to a 4-year school after that. I either want to be a labor and delivery nurse or a pediatric oncology nurse. And with that being said, I will be job shadowing somebody in the medical field, but it's kind of hard right now because of everything that's happening. And then what her classes taught me is how to make yourself unforgettable. By making first impressions, talking to new people, trying new things I haven't done before. And that'll all help me in life, and I will carry that throughout the rest of my life. Thank you.
My name's Samantha Lind. Next year, I plan to do the Ag Transfer Program at Blackhawk East Community College, and then I plan to transfer to Iowa State and major in agriculture education. That being said, I job shadowed a girl who does physical therapy for horses, and then I plan to shadow a ag educator from another district. And Ms. Pointer's class ultimately helped me figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and then, like Jared said, gave me a lot of life skills that I'm going to use for forever.
A quick side note on Samantha, she's getting a gas intern grant through JJC, and she's actually getting paid to be a TA for us this year. While getting college credit through JJC. So that's been a fun thing for her since she wanted to be a teacher. It's something for students interested in being ag teachers, trying to keep them interested in the career. So she has up to 80 hours that she can get paid to help us be basically a TA in our classes. So that's kind of another kickstart for her going forward.
Hi, my name is Jessie Mansky. Next year, I will be attending the University of Wisconsin-Platteville and pursuing a degree in ag business with an emphasis in communications and marketing. Through KP's class, I'm planning on job shadowing Christina Weaver, who owns a farm out in Campton Hills and runs her own horse barn, does nutrition for her horses, and takes care of them. And I will also be job shadowing Dave Emmert, who is a vet at Prairie View Animal Hospital. And through KP's class, I've learned how to be a functioning adult and how to take care of my taxes and my insurance and all of that sort of thing.
And I make them do really scary things like this, but they'll survive. Okay, go ahead, Tyler.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name's Tyler Ekstrom, and my plans for the fall are to attend Iowa State University, where I will be majoring in agribusiness to hopefully have a career in ag sales then following that. And then my job shadow that I have set up is with Mr. Van Bogart at CHS, where he's an agronomist and a seed salesman, and the goal of that is to hopefully see if that's actually what I want to do with my life after following him for a day and see what his day-to-day responsibilities are. And then some things that Ag Academy has taught me. You always hear about the classes like, oh, math, this.
Oh, no.
Oops.
It's okay. Yeah?
Learn about all these things that you'll lose for your whole life.
Okay. Tyler, can you repeat that last part one more time about my class?
What was the last? Share any of it?
Yeah, what my class taught you.
All right, I'll start over. I could tell when the internet unstable thing came up. I love Zoom.
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
That's our
so this
theme for the evening.
Yeah, that's right. I did it again.
This class teaches you about the financial skills that you'll use for your whole life, and it's not like every typical math class or any class where you'd be like, when will I use this in the adult world? This class teaches you those things as you learn how to budget, how to take out appropriate loans. You learn about car payments, you learn about housing contracts, you learn about different types of insurance, and you learn about how to file your own taxes too. And then all the experiences you get, like having to present to a board, even though it is a virtual call and I can't see anyone. I guess it relieves the stress, but.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. I'm so glad you could come hang out because we'll also talk about state degrees here in a minute, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, Morgan, you're up, kiddo.
Good evening. My name is Morgan Fiddler. I plan on attending Kishwaukee College to complete my gen eds. Then I plan on transferring to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville to major in agricultural education. I wanted to stay close for at least one more year after high school so I can really focus on my livestock and my last year in 4-H. Also, since my sister will be a senior at UW-Platteville next year, I know she wouldn't want me attending the same school as her. This year, I will be job shadowing former SHS graduate Anna Shelkoff, who is an ag literacy and communications specialist at the DeKalb County Farm Bureau. I am interested in learning about her role at the Farm Bureau and how she helps the agricultural community. In our Ag Academy class, we get to learn about jobs in our community. We have guest speakers come in to talk to us about their jobs. My favorite guest speakers so far were the conservation cop and the nurses. I have learned many valuable life lessons by taking this class, such as learning about the different types of insurance and filing for taxes. Thank you.
Awesome. Good job, Morgan. Thank you very much. Don't go away because we're going to do some degrees. Awesome. So I hope that you learned a little bit about my students and what they're doing and what that has done for them. I'm going to introduce Christian Thurbinger to come up and talk a little bit about our department and what's been going on and the academic side of things.
And not so much the academic, but more just kind of about the program and really how in the last 2 years since I've got here, I've tried to make some further improvements into the future. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Christian Thurbinger. I'm a 2013 graduate of Sycamore High School, and now I'm on my second year teaching here at Sycamore High School. So a couple of the things, when I started this coming back, I was like, all right, we've really got to start developing and all that kind of stuff in terms of how our program is laid out. And so one of the things that we typically run into a lot of times is the age-old, oh, I remember when I used that back when I was in high school kind of thing. And so with that being said, I really wanted to go out and start getting donations and making those connections with people in the community. And so as you can see a list of different companies that have been extremely generous to our program. For example, Kohler Engines out of Wisconsin was willing to donate 24 fully built, fully functional engines to our program and actually delivered them to us. Those are for the agriculture mechanics students as they start to develop those skills in small engines, which has actually come into really good play this last week as we have just serviced around 80-ish lawnmowers this past week. So that has been a really big help. Another one was SK Tools. So kind of backstory a little bit in terms of me knowing a friend who went here, now works at Ideal Tools, and you'll see Ideal is actually on there as well. But since SK used to be or still is a subsidiary of Ideal, I was able to get a connection through that individual. And so SK was kind enough to donate 30 individualized tool sets for our students to use. This was all pre-pandemic. I didn't actually realize that every kid was going to need their own tool set. So that has actually been a really big help as well, because as we start to disassemble engines and as we start to do a lot of this servicing, we're then able to have every student with their own set of tools. Ideal Industries and SK actually followed Ideal because Ideal was my original contact, and so when I sat down with them, they were really interested to start building this program in terms of how can the students help in product development phases and those types of things. And so Ideal was actually giving us 30 individualized tool sets for electricity purposes. So every kid has their own set of wire strippers, cable rippers, all that kind of stuff. So that has been extremely helpful, especially this year. 3M actually gave us a donation via Donor's Choice this past year for snap circuits. And for those of you that don't know what snap circuits are, basically it's kind of like Legos, but with electricity. And so eventually that was kind of our intro way into electricity before we actually started working with wire, before we started working with any kind of actual electrical components. We understood the basics there. So that has been extremely helpful. Compere Financial is a farm agency mainly local to the Midwestern region of the United States, and so they actually have office over at the DeKalb County Farm Bureau that we, Kara and I both have people that we know that work in that building. And so they had a donation opportunity come up, and we got a donation for about $2,800 to get 9 tool carts and then the 4 greenhouse benches. So that was kind of one of those things piecing back together. Now we've got the tools, what are we going to put the tools in? And so we've kind of started that process of building that program. And then the 4 greenhouse benches, just making everything uniform, fixing things that didn't necessarily last the longevity of their lifetime, things that we attempted to fix that didn't work. And so now we have a uniform system in the greenhouse now, with all of our greenhouse benches being exactly the same. One of the other hats that I wear on top of the ag teacher and FFA advisor is I'm also the welding club advisor here at Sycamore High School. And so we started this program before my time. I came back in, and what we really heavily depend on with this one is just materials cost is extremely high. And so we sent out solicitation letters in terms of, this is our program, and then we had students go and talk to them. Most of these students, or most of these companies, I should say, have students who go here and who are involved, so that helps tremendously as well in terms of them getting to see the students work with welding materials, actually getting the hands-on experience of what a 6013 welding rod looks like, as instead of cheese and crackers, or instead of not getting that experience via a YouTube channel or anything like that. And then finally, SEF. This actually happened at the end of last year. We were unable to get those, but SEF gave us a donation for 9 practice drones and then 2 4K camera drones, which have been used extensively for crop scouting. We made some videos with them in terms of when our plots were getting planted. I was actually just at the middle school the other day taking some videos for an interactive map of the middle school project. So we've been using those a lot. So that's just an extensive list, I guess you could say, of the things that we've really tried to improve here at Sycamore High School in the ag department.
And I want to say that a lot of it is due to you guys letting us continue to grow the program. We really appreciate that, and the support that you give us all the time. I enjoy being able to go, and Mr. Reinick was a big help with some of this too, because he'd walk down and he'd be like, oh, come on, why don't you have this? Because he loves, woodworking is a hobby of his, so it was kind of fun to have him. We've now since added a CNC machine and a glow forge at the high school, which is fun. So I'm working on a gift for all the seniors right now that Mr. Carlson asked me to kind of do with the glow forge. So I think that, and the trophy store was going out of business, so we got a lot of extra plaques. So I'm hoping to be able to make our own plaques for banquet, start doing some of the stuff, teaching the kids these skills that they would see as they leave. And then we have a couple more accomplishments. Max Griffey is with us tonight. Max Griffey was the state winner in ag mechanics repair and maintenance. So he now has moved on and will compete at the national level this summer. So Max started working before he was 16 down with Dale Bolander in the maintenance shed. And he put in hours there, and he turned 16 and he got a job at CSR Bobcat. And with that experience, he interviewed at the section and district level, and then he was top 5 in state, and he interviewed spring break, Saturday of spring break, and was announced the winner in that area. So now we have an application to fill out for him to compete at the national level. So since I've been here, this is my 3rd one that I've had. So congratulations to Max and all of his work with his record book for that. Okay, Ms. Wiedemann, if you want to come up really quick. We have 2 more things and we'll be done, I promise. I might talk longer than Tim. Nick, don't give me that look.
You don't talk as fast as he does, though.
Hi, y'all. So I'm Courtney Wiedemann. I am the newest addition to the high school agriculture department here at Sycamore High School. So I was fortunate enough to coach the horse judging team this year. We placed 2nd at the state contest, so that was awesome. Yep, if you guys want to come on up. So we have 3 of the 4 team members here tonight. So just real quick, a background on the horse judging contest. We started, meeting and practicing about 2 months before the contest. The contest consists of what we call 8 classes. Within those 8 classes, we have 4 riding classes and 4 what we call halter classes. Halter is more judged on the horse and how it's put together. Riding classes, we're looking at that horse and rider communication and how well that horse and rider is getting along while showing in the show pen. So with that, then the students had to give a oral reasons is what we call it in the horse judging world. Basically, it's a 2-minute speech explaining why did that student place that class, why they did. So it is rehearsed, it's memorized. They only get about 20 to 30 minutes to actually write and then memorize and give that speech. Like I said, this was all done virtually this year, so we had to actually tape the contestants and then send that tape in. But we were fortunate enough to be, like I said, second place in states. So we had 3 of our team members were in the top 10 of the entire state of Illinois in this contest, which is awesome. Usually with a lot of your teams, you only have like top 1, top 2. So to have 3 in top 10 is a huge accomplishment. Heidi Wood was 4th overall, Samantha Lynn was 5th overall, and then Jessie Mansky was 7th place overall. So congratulations to these ladies.
And then the last one, and I let Tyler Morgan, they just so they can hear, they don't necessarily have to be on screen, but I do have my state degree recipients with us tonight. And as you know, this is the highest degree that a member can receive. It's a lot of hours, a lot of time put in, especially when we were hybrid or remote and, they were having to work on it from home with our help a little bit here. They were coming in after school and they could put in hours just to get it done. And so with me tonight, you can just stand. I have Jared Clausen, Tyler Ekstrom, Heidi Wood, Miranda Wilbur, Jaden Slutz, Sarah Ward, and Morgan Fiddler. So these 7 will receive, and we just got notice that we'll have an in-person state convention at the Corn Crib in Bloomington, the outside baseball facility, on June 1st. So that's super exciting. They'll be able to still cross the stage, even though it's not a traditional stage. They'll be able to get their recognition like they should. So congratulations. Congratulations, Morgan and Tyler. And I think that's the end of ours. So I just once again want to thank you guys for your support in allowing us to continue to grow our program and to do the things with the students that we've been doing, to keep them involved and keep them coming back. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done this year. So thank you.
Do you have any plans?
Not so fast.
Don't just walk away like that. Usually the culmination of all your efforts at the end of the year is the FFA banquet.
Yes.
And so do you have any plans? Is there a virtual one?
We're going to do it in person here on June 3rd because we were able to increase the capacity. And so we will be able to do it here on June 3rd. So you guys will be getting an invite like always.
Oh, okay.
So that'll
great.
be exciting this year. It's just a little bit later because of the middle school musical and then the high school musical, and then David and I played phone tag and tried to look at a lot of different dates, and we settled on June 3rd. So we will be having one in person. And we'll have our plant sale in person as well, with like capacities in the greenhouse of how many people. So that'll be coming up as well, which I'm happy because I think people love the plant sale, and last year I pulled 188 orders with the help of Mr. Thurwanger and Mr. Ekstrom. And a couple other people that came in to help, and that was a lot of work. So I'm happy that people can come back and shop and pick their own flowers. So those both things will be coming up.
Well, great. That's great because I look forward to that every year. Yeah. It's just such a great way to celebrate the accomplishments of all your students, and it's just everyone should attend because it's an amazing experience to see. Just to see how well these kids can do when they present, how much they've accomplished, and if you go year after year, it's really interesting to see how they grow as time goes by. So.
Yep. So mark your calendar, June 3rd, and I'll get you guys a formal invite. Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Great. Glad we get to
Appreciate it.
celebrate. That's
Yep.
good.
Thanks.
Thank you to Mr. Carlson and the Ag Department. I was not in FFA or in ag growing up, but in my career as an educator and an administrator, it's been one of the most impressive programs. Watching students give their oral reasons when they judge is unbelievable. It's quite a feat. So congratulations to all the students, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Can't believe they're not sticking around for my part of the program.
No, they get extra points if they stay, though.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Return to Learn, and I have divided up the Return to Learn update. Initially, we'll just talk about how things are going and have gone over the last couple of weeks, especially. I did separate out the future, so planning for next year is under the future-focused item tonight, so I'll talk about that a little bit later. So first of all, the transition to the Monday, Thursday in-person learning plan has gone well. I think the transition to the longer days on March 15th helped, as well as then being able to make preparations prior to and during spring break. Thank you to the staff for their dedication and efforts to make the transition as smooth as it was. I know teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, custodians, maintenance workers, all got involved moving furniture around and making all the preparations to make that happen. We literally could not have done it without them, and there was a lot of work that went on over spring break that made it happen, so we really appreciate that. About 20% overall of our students have continued to opt for remote learning, so as a district, we're about 80% in person. And then I got those numbers broken down just a little bit. So at the elementary level, about 13% of our students are still remote. At the middle school level, we're right at about 19%, and at the high school level, we're just under 30% at 27%. So you can see how that spread happens K through 12. High school students, there's a lot of social activities and activities going on, but for a variety of reasons, they've opted for remote learning. One of the questions that Mr. Carlson touched on earlier, and I'll come back to here in a little bit, is what does remote learning look like next year? Our activity seasons are well underway. Mr. Carlson touched on the accolades and how our teams have finished already. Fall season is just within a week or two of wrapping up. My own daughter plays volleyball. I think their last week is next week. Spring season has already started, so I think we had a girls' soccer game, a softball game, and a baseball game this evening. So those sports have started also. We did have 2 recent positive COVID cases within the school district that resulted in some quarantines. I'll talk about quarantines in a little bit more detail here in just a couple of minutes. That resulted in quarantines for some small groups of students. I do want to recognize the staff, and as I talk about close contact tracing a little bit later, it's been a lot easier because our staff has seating charts, even the buses have seating assignments. So when we're notified of a COVID case, a positive case, there are a lot of pieces in place that allow us to do contact tracing. So we can keep these groups small when we have to implement quarantines. With regard to potential quarantines, our philosophy is to expect the worst and hope for the best. So we expect there to be quarantines. Of course, we hope that there aren't. And with the safety protocols that we have in place, we hope that helps. But we do have more students in the buildings. There is more social interaction. There is shorter social distancing in the classroom and more congregating outside of school as well. So I think with the warm weather, we're starting to see that in the community. Our numbers have gone up a little bit. The next bullet point indicates immunity levels in our community are rising, but so have the number of cases. So we're not quite out of the woods yet, but we are making some progress. So just to talk a little bit about the health metrics, this is 30-day test positivity for Region 1. And you can see there towards the beginning of March, we were at about 2 in the low 2%. It has risen. There is some concern there. I know the health department is watching that very closely. Our own health staff is watching that closely. It hasn't skyrocketed like it did previously in October, November, December, so that's a good sign. We're still keeping under that 8% threshold that the state has identified, but you can see where that test positivity has gone up. It's actually kind of plateaued here within the last week or so, but that's something that we'll continue to monitor very closely. And then in terms of DeKalb County, what does the 7-day rolling average for test positivity look like? The most recent data as of when I put this PowerPoint together today, the slideshow together today, in DeKalb County, the test positivity rate was at 6.3%. We have seen an increase in the number of cases. So again, we'll continue to monitor that here in DeKalb County. We're continuing to work very closely with the health department and monitor data as things evolve. So we had some quarantines that we had to implement over the last week or so. So I received some questions about that. You know, what's our process? We haven't talked about that in quite a while. So just want to touch on that. So I'll cover some points, and if there are questions afterwards, I would be glad to answer those. Issuing a quarantine to any individual, whether it's a student or a staff member, is only done when necessary. We would rather have our staff in the schools. We would rather have students in the schools. But we do that as a precaution to minimize the transmission. The assistance of our community is essential to minimizing any possible transmission of COVID-19, not only following safety protocols, but being cooperative and working with us in terms of communication. When we make calls home, working with us, sharing information as they're willing to and able, as well as reporting information as it comes in. We've consistently followed the most current guidance from IDPH and the health department as we work with the health department on every potential quarantine decision. That guidance has changed. We've talked about that from the beginning. The exclusion protocol has changed from last spring, over the summer, this fall, and even the winter. So we make sure they're always following the most current guidance, and that's part of why the health department is involved in almost every quarantine decision to make sure that we're interpreting that guidance correctly and making the right decision. Really, Nick Reinick and Corey Mock head that up, so when there's a case, they're the ones that get involved and take care of the information gathering and then the contact tracing. I get involved if there's a little bit of gray area, but by then they've already talked to the health department, so they can give me guidance and recommendations from the health department when we make decisions. Every effort is made to ensure confidentiality. So we don't reveal names when a student or a staff member is a close contact. We don't tell them where that came from or who the student or the individual is. We just let them know that they're a close contact and that they need to follow a quarantine. The process usually starts with a notification, whether it's by an employee, a parent or guardian, or the health department. There have been a couple of occasions where we've been notified first from the health department. They're good about communicating those things. By and large, it comes straight from the individual if they're an adult, or the family if it's a student. Then we start gathering information. After that notification, that depends on what the situation is, what information we've received, what documentation we've received, and what we haven't. And then contact tracing follows. So I touched on this a little bit ago. Seating charts, information about schedules, and teachers and staff just being able to recall what they were doing in class that day, so that if it's a class where students are normally sitting down, but maybe they were up and doing an activity socially distanced. Staff have been great about helping us track down that information. By and large, all of that information gathering and contact tracing happens if students need to be quarantined. We do that with all of the adults first and foremost. We have had to involve students in those conversations a little bit, but typically by the time we recognize that students need to be quarantined, we've gathered all the information that we need, and at that point we're just, if they're in the building, bringing them down to the office as we would if they were sick under any other circumstances, contacting home and getting them picked up. We also follow up with an email notification to all the impacted individuals and families, and we do that by phone if possible and if time permits. By and large, we were able to make phone calls home and let parents know that if a student has been quarantined, and that gives the parents the opportunity to hear that information and then ask questions. There are cases where it happens at the end of the day, it happens over the weekend, and time just doesn't permit us to make a phone call. We always follow up with an email notification with all the pertinent information in there. Once that's done, we continue to review quarantine situations. So if new information comes to light, we'll review that. We'll work with the health department, and there have been cases where we've issued a quarantine, but because new information comes out, we're able to shorten those quarantines or bring individuals back to school right away. It doesn't happen a lot, because by the time we make those decisions about quarantines, things are pretty clear. But there are situations where new information comes up, we track that down, we work with the health department, and then we can reverse or end a quarantine if we need to. So it's a little bit about the process. Would be glad to answer any questions about that while we're on this topic.
Hey, Steve, I had a follow-up question from a parent involved in this quarantine process with their student. And the question that I received was, how does it work with attendance? So if you have a student that's quarantined or being asked to quarantine because of exposure, do they need to call the attendance office every day to say, oh, by the way, again, we're in quarantine here? Or is there how does that generally work?
So good question, and I'll answer, and then Nick jump in here if we need to add anything. So first and foremost, we ask all parents, if your student's not in school, just let us know for sure. In the case of a quarantine, we do communicate that to schools, so they know that, the main office knows that. I don't think they necessarily need to be calling in every day, but just so everybody knows, that's something that we've asked all families to do. Anytime a student isn't in the school or a remote student is going to log on that day, we ask the parents to let us know that. So I think it's always a good idea to just send an email, make a phone call just in case. If for any reason they don't need to continue doing that, the staff at the school can let them know. But anything that I've missed?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is sometimes that might be a day or two delayed, just based on when it happens, when the event happens, and whether it be the health office or the attendance office still working through things and trying to gather everything up, because we're still trying to work through these and get people cleared. So sometimes it may not happen if the case happens at the end of the day and notification's made, that next day we might not be ready to have attendance already taken care of, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like the initial step would be to make sure you're communicating with your school if you're the parent calling up on behalf of the student. But if you're in the day, say 6, by then the school should know that, oh yes,
yeah,
John Doe is quarantining because he was exposed. So okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions regarding quarantines? Okay. So one of the topics that we've talked about, I didn't include this in Future Focus. Future Focus really is about next year, but summer school has been a topic that we've been discussing for quite a while, and here recently we've been able to finalize some things. Mr. Carlson touched on the approach for high school. High school and middle school have had existing summer school programs, so those programs are going to continue to exist. They will change just a little bit. There will be some adjustments. Part of that is due to the pandemic, and part of that is due to just general improvements in the program. So as time goes on, programs that we offer, we're going to tweak those a little bit, but some of the adjustments are as a result of supporting students, through the pandemic. So high school, middle school, summer school programs will go on pretty much as planned with some tweaks. We've traditionally not offered summer school at the K-5 level. We've talked about this for a long time, and after much discussion, we are not recommending a summer school program at the K-5 level this year, and there's a couple of reasons why. Research from other catastrophic events, I used Hurricane Katrina here as an example, and recommendations throughout the pandemic have emphasized focusing on moving forward. So in other words, not backing up and trying to fill in gaps, but rather identifying what essential skills are, what the priorities are in terms of the curriculum, and continuing to move forward as best you can. We've never experienced something like COVID-19 before in the pandemic over the last year, but other comparable events, the researchers have found that you're better off to continue moving forward as best you can. In addition, recent studies have predicted that there's really been a minimal disruption in reading achievement and only a slightly greater disruption in mathematics. So in general, feedback from our staff supports that, and we're not really predicting as much of an academic loss as maybe we initially thought when the pandemic started. Doesn't mean that there won't be some, so we'll continue to plan for that next fall, but it hasn't been as great as we thought it was going to be, which in the long run is a good thing. And last but not least, one of the conversations we had multiple times was how best to use the resources that are going to be at our disposal. So we've received some ESSER funds. There's actually going to be 3 waves of ESSER funds. We received one in the spring. We used that this year. There's another kind of lump of ESSER funds that we're going to receive, and there's a third distribution that's going to be coming. We can spread that out over a couple of school years. And as we talked about using those resources most effectively, in the end, what we decided to do was, instead of identifying a small group of students who are going to get support over a couple of weeks over the summer, to use those resources in ways that are going to impact all students over the course of an entire school year or school years. So that was kind of the last nail in the coffin when it came to making this recommendation. We recognize that the pandemic has been challenging for a lot of students at the K-5 level as well as 6 through 12. But in the long run, we felt like for these reasons, as well as the tiredness that Mr. Carlson alluded to earlier, there's been a lot of work that's gone in, and for a variety of reasons, just taking time over the summer to kind of return to some normalcy seemed to make sense. So for those reasons, we're not recommending or moving forward with a summer school program at K-5. We will work on ways that we can identify resources that parents can have access to over the summer, whether it's through programs at the public library, NIU, or other programs that will be available. We'll put those all together in a location where parents can access those for K-5 students. So if they want to work with their student over the summer, there are resources that are going to enable them to do that if they so choose. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions regarding summer school. Okay. I'll come back to future focus, but I'm going to take a quick break. The next agenda item really has to do with the administration organizational chart. So when I first arrived in the school district, this was one of the things that I looked at was the existing administration organizational chart. It looked a little different than this one. We did move a couple of things around, and especially with the creation of the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and Educational Programs, the position that Mr. Reinick fills. We just tried to come up with the most logical way to organize the administration of the school district. So I don't think this has got a pointer on it, so I'll do my best to describe it. Obviously, the school board is at the top of that list. I report directly to the school board. And then there are a couple of groups, a couple of individuals that report directly to me, as well as groups of the principals is one of the groups. Both of the assistant superintendents, Mr. Reinick and Mrs. Stuckert, as well as the director of the Oscar program, Courtney Walls, and then the communication department. David Olson really is my primary contact, but I work with all members of the communication department for things that we do within the school district. We also have 4 other directors. This made sense for the Director of Teaching and Learning as well as the Director of Student Services to report directly to Mr. Reinick. Those 2 positions seem to fit with his job responsibilities. And then the Director of Transportation and the Director of Building and Grounds both report to Mrs. Stuckert, Kathy Sheehan, and Mark Ekstrom. So that's the way the administration is organized at the district level and then all the way down to the building level. This is not an item that needs approval. Just wanted to share this with the school board and would be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Still pretty lean for a district of our size, so.
I think so. There's a couple of positions that I could tell you right off the top of my head I'd like to consider talking about, but I think it's really important to continue to operate lean and within our budget and within our resources. And Mrs. Stuckert keeps me on task with that. So we're not having those conversations tonight. And I can say that because she's not here. Now we'll move on and talk a little bit about future focused. So planning for the 21-22 school year has been ongoing. Now that we have modified the instructional model here this spring, we're turning more and more attention to planning for next year. We are continuing to plan for a full return for the 21-22 school year. I will tell you that registration numbers are significantly down from previous years. We'll be sending out reminders regarding registration just to make sure families know that registration is going on right now. We've probably not sent out the reminders that we have in the past, but there's a lot of things that have been going on. So that's one of the things that Mr. Olson and I have talked about, and we'll get those reminders out. It's important for us, and so let me back up for just 1 second. The registration numbers are down significantly, and that first kind of caught me off guard. But at the end of the day, we still have the same number of students pretty much in the community. They need to go to school. Some of them, everybody's got choices, and there are other opportunities out there. However, we know that most of the students are going to be returning to our school district in the fall. So just because registration numbers are down doesn't necessarily mean that enrollment is going to be down in the fall. In fact, I think we're going to see some students who left the district come back in the fall, especially as more and more information gets out about the planning for next school year. But it is important to get those registration numbers in. So it really benefits the students. So in terms of rostering students at the elementary level, actually across the district, but really schedules at the middle school and the high school in specific, because there's more choice and opportunity at the high school. For students that want to make sure that they get the specific classes, getting registered for the next school year and making sure that those spots in those classes are reserved is a good idea. And then other appropriate services that we offer. So some worst case scenarios, these are hypothetical. Hope that we would avoid these. If numbers continue to be down at the high school level, particularly with singleton classes where there's only one section offered, if that enrollment is unusually low, we'll have a conversation about whether or not that class is actually going to run in the fall or the spring. Let's talk about elementary. If grade levels become full at one elementary school, one of the things that the district has had to do in the past is move a student from one school to another. We want to avoid that at all costs. And the best way to do that is getting students registered so that we can place them where they need to be, we can get them enrolled in the classes that they want to take, and make sure that we're providing the educational opportunities that we want to. Accurate registration information helps us avoid those situations and support students. And last, we talked about this just the other day when we talked about registration numbers. At a certain point, after the school year is over, we roll over all of the students in our student database. So we go from the 2021 school year to the 21-22 school year. There's a possibility that students during that process who haven't registered are unenrolled, and then have to go through the enrollment process all over again. So not just re-registering where all that information is kept in the system, it's starting from scratch. So proving affidavits of residency and things like that can happen if students don't get registered. So really, again, the benefit is for students and their families to get them registered and help us get them where they need to be. So back to planning. IDPH and ISB, the State Board of Education, have strongly recommended that all schools plan for in-person learning for all students for next year unless the student or a member of their household is at risk for a severe illness. Our planning follows that guidance, and although we've not finalized that process, it's likely that students who fall into those categories, whether they are at risk for a severe illness or some member of their household is at risk for severe illness, that they'll need to provide some documentation to the school to be designated as a remote learner. In other words, that likely is not going to be just an option next year. It's not a voluntary decision. We won't go through the designation process that we've gone through this year. All students will be enrolled as in-person learners unless we have that documentation, or unless those students and their families contact the building, the main office of the building where they are going to attend school, and have a conversation with the building administrator there. We've had situations in the past as well as this year where students are in unique circumstances. They contact the building principal, they have a conversation about that, and in some cases we're able to be flexible and offer a situation that's going to work for those students that's a little bit out of the ordinary. We try to stay away from that, just to try to treat everybody as fairly as we can. But treating people equitably doesn't always mean everybody gets the exact same thing. We'll continue to do that. So if there are situations where families have unique circumstances, all we do is ask that they contact the school and have a conversation with us. But for students who themselves are at risk for a severe illness or a member of their household is at risk for that, I would encourage them to start having a conversation with their physician. And that could be physical health. That could also be mental health. So if there's a situation there, I would encourage families to just make contact with those healthcare providers and start talking about what documentation might look like. And as we finalize our process, we'll roll that out to our community. This was actually one of the things that we talked about at the CAC meeting last week with the parents, and how they felt about that, and got really good feedback from them on that. So that's what that's going to look like for next year. As we plan for remote learners to receive instruction, we're planning for them to have a dedicated remote teacher or a dedicated remote class. So in other words, the teachers have done a phenomenal job with the parallel model for quite some time. There are some classes right now at the elementary level where all of the students are back in person. I can hear cheers every once in a while from a teacher who doesn't have to worry about remote planning and recording videos. As good a job as they've done, what we'd like to do is use some of those ESSER funds and other resources to create separate remote sections so our teachers who are working with students in person can focus just on those students. One of the challenges will be figuring out what that number is. So as we roll out the process of students who need to consider remote options, we'll ask them to get that information back to us in a timely manner so we can figure out what the need is going to be. Remember earlier, those numbers were about 13, 19, and 27%. We know that some of those numbers are going to be lower, some of them perhaps significantly lower when it comes to the fall. We'll be able to best support student needs if we have that information, again, in a timely fashion. So trying to get away from that parallel learning model and just have dedicated remote teachers or dedicated remote classes for those students. One of the nice things about this year is that we've tried a lot of different things. We've taught remotely, we've taught under a hybrid model, we've taught under a parallel learning model. We've learned a lot already in the current instructional model, 4 days a week for longer days now. It's going to allow us to pilot some of those things again this spring and help us to continue to make decisions as we plan for next year. We do have some what I would call unresolved items or still some outstanding challenges. Will the available physical space for instruction, will that meet IDPH guidelines? Will those guidelines change? If so, how are they going to change? Excuse me. So several weeks ago, we had a conversation about planning for next school year and planning for a full return. And there was still a lot of unknowns out there. In fact, that was prior to IDPH and the CDC changing social distancing guidelines from 6 feet to 3 feet. I would like to sit here and tell you that I'm hopeful that as things change over the spring and the summer, we will start to see other guidelines change as well. Certainly at some point we'll start to see those guidelines change. My hope is that as we go through the spring and into the summer, either those guidelines are changing or we're getting information from organizations like IDPH that let us know what we can plan for, in terms of how we can use physical space and whether or not social distancing rules are going to change again. Busing or transportation department, Kathy Sheehan and the group down there have done a great job as well. I don't know how many different routes Kathy has programmed this school year and made them work and still tweaks them on a regular basis. There's still some things up in the air with busing. So we'd like to continue with the staggered schedule for start and dismissal times. One of the other topics that we talked about last week with CAC. Got parent perspective on that. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What are the challenges? Certainly daycare or just supervising young children. If you have older students who watch younger students and we have staggered start and dismissal times, what's the best option for parents in terms of older students being able to supervise those younger students? Is it at the beginning of the day? Is it at the end of the day? One of the things I just realized that I left off of this presentation is Oscar. We are planning for a full Oscar program in the fall. So that will help families plan for some of that daycare or child care both before school and after school. So would ask parents to know that we're planning for a full Oscar as we make decisions about these staggered start times and what that looks like. Bus capacity is currently at 50 individuals, which really means 49 people plus the driver. In most cases, it's 49 students, but there are situations where we've got a monitor on the bus, so that counts as one of those 50 individuals. Is that going to change? I will tell you that some of the decisions, and this is my personal opinion and soapbox, some of the guidance we've received for busing doesn't always match with the guidance that we receive for instruction in the classroom and use of physical space. So will we see those become a little bit more in alignment? Is there going to be a little bit more flexibility on busing? So that's something that we're watching for. And one of the last things I put on there has to do with food service. That's possible right now under our current model in every building because we're using gym space in every building as overflow space. I have been in the elementary school and I haven't been to the middle school to see this in action, but I've been to the high school and seen it in action. It's making it work for this school year, but is that guidance going to change? So we'll have to keep an eye on that. We've got a great relationship with the health department, so they are our first direct connection in terms of guidance from IDPH. Those are things that we're going to try to get answers for as quickly as we can. It will all impact planning. Our goal is, whether the guidance changes or not, to make plans for a full return in the fall, and as well these issues as well as other issues, do our best to plan for those this spring so we can communicate to both our staff, our students, and our families about what next year is going to look like before the end of the school year. My goal is to not leave as little hanging as possible over the summer so that we're not still having to work on these plans. There's a lot more that's certain and known now that wasn't known last summer or even in the fall. So we're going to try to get these plans wrapped up here so that parents know what the plan is going to be, as well as students and staff. There may continue to be modifications to guidelines for specific activities. And when I say activities, I mean sports, athletics. They were modified just again, I think it was yesterday. They lifted the requirement for face masks for some of the low-risk sports. So that goes into effect right away. There may be other modifications, but I talked to Chauncey Carrick this afternoon. We are planning for a traditional schedule for activities next year. So we're playing football right now. They'll have some contact days over the summer, and then we're going to play football right away again in the fall. Before I go on, any questions about anything I've talked about so far? Anything I've missed that we need to plan for?
Will there be an Oscar program this summer?
There will be, and it will be expanded from what it is this spring. So the limit, I think, is 50. I think that number's gone to 100 over the summer, and then it will be a full Oscar program next fall. And sign up for Oscar, Summer Oscar happened already. That program is already full. I know that Mrs. Walls keeps a waiting list. So if parents are interested in that and didn't get signed up, they just need to contact her and get on the waiting list.
I have a couple questions. One, so if a parent does provide documentation that either the student or a member of the household is at risk for severe illness, so they are not able to attend in person, how are they going to be dealt with from an equity standpoint with regards to other activities, whether that's music, orchestras, athletics? If they can't be here for the school or clubs, then I don't want to say they shouldn't be allowed to be there for that, but wouldn't that be contradictory then? If you can't be in the school for that, would you be here for orchestras or football or for orchestra? How are we going to deal with those situations?
Well, really good question. So if those students who can't be here are interested in participating in activities, that'll be a conversation that we'll have with those parents. First of all, what are the restrictions? Mm-hmm. So we're very clear about what they can and cannot do in terms of activities. Some of those are physical activities that you mentioned, and some of them aren't. You know, they're activities that a student might be able to participate in, for example, if it's primarily outdoors. They may need to participate virtually. just like Mr. Tanaki talked about the students participating in orchestra. Certainly, we need to be aware of equity issues and make sure that we're being fair. But I think most importantly, we want to continue to make sure that students have access to the opportunities as normally as possible. So I think we've done a good job working with students when specific situations have come up. We'll continue to do that, not only because we're required to, but because that's what we want to do. So we'll have to work through those on a case-by-case basis, and sometimes we have to be creative. But we've done that this year, and I would say we've probably done that in the past as well.
The flip side is I just don't want them to say, well, I'm glad to play football, but, I don't want to show up to school.
Yeah.
So, there's a balance there.
They'll need to have a really good excuse as to why they can do one and not the other.
Not to pick on football, but whatever. Orchestras is just as much contact.
Yeah, I think that's really a good point.
And then my other one was related to the food service. I understand the impact of that. I just hope that going forward, at least in some of the buildings, I know we have our hands tied a little bit in some places, but there have got to be some other spaces that don't take away teaching stations. Mm-hmm. And, extended learning areas, libraries that maybe during lunch, the library is just not accessible right now. And that's where you're staging, because you're not feeding them lunch there. They're just being staged either, to go into lunch. So rather than taking away those teachers' teaching stations, they're the only ones that have it taken away. So trying to be more equitable with their program as opposed to saying, well, it's the biggest space, so it's the easiest place to put kids.
Yeah.
Maybe there's better places to do that without taking away teaching stations.
And at like the elementary level, the day is still a little shorter than the normal day. One of the things we want to do is get all those specials back. Mm-hmm. We have to provide space to make sure that PE teachers have a space to do PE. So we're continuing to think about things differently. Can we use other spaces? Can they in classrooms or libraries or other locations? So
right.
We are looking at those. I think that's a really valid point, and that's something that we're trying to resolve for next year.
Good.
Steve, going back to Mr. Wilder, going back to Steve's question regarding remote students and equitability, I do have a concern based on everything you've said and the concern of the teachers as far as how those students are going to impact our ability to have teachers focused on just the in-person students and not having to split their time between remote and in-person. Because while that seems easy to do on the surface and maybe even at the elementary to set a dedicated teacher aside to handle those students, it does seem to become much more complicated at the middle school and high school level. Well, now I've got 28 kids for my whatever class that I only have one or two sections of, but I got one or two remote students. And now how is that teacher, what are we asking them to do as far as now parallel teaching or whatnot? So I guess I would ask at some point here in the near future that we get a group of, maybe when we understand more what the requests are going to be from students, but get maybe a group together of teachers and administrators to understand what model can we pursue that everyone's going to be able to accept for next year, knowing that we get to kind of start from scratch again as far as we don't have to adapt to where we've been right now. We can take all the lessons learned from this year and maybe think creatively about recorded lessons that we already have from this year that maybe that student could use for the parallel portion next year and just set, some office hours aside for maybe questions throughout the week or something. But I would like to hear what the teacher's perspective is on that and how we can make a model work for those students. The second is, I did want to go back to what Tim Carlson said about not maybe losing some of the advancements that we've made with our ability to host some classes remotely where maybe it makes sense, or maybe it's an extra section that will support students' needs that either from a scheduling standpoint or otherwise, where now we can offer that. And I don't know if it's something that we're going to have tons of classes where we've got remote-only sections or hybrid sections, but I would like to invite Tim at a future point to come back maybe and tell us what classes he would suggest offering in that method and how that would look and how that would benefit the student body.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. That's one of the things, we've talked about from time to time is just not losing some of the innovations that we've implemented. But what does that look like moving forward? And certainly I think there's going to be the opportunity for teachers to work with students using technology. And there may be some teachers who come to us and say, hey, the parallel model worked fine for the content that I teach. I would like to continue doing that. We're fine with that. We've got the technology and they've got the experience to do that. But requiring all of our teachers to do that, I think, is something that we can't avoid. So your point is a good one. What does that then look like? And we've had some conversation about that. I'd like to fine tune that a little bit more before we present to the board. But I think it would be good to have, Tim talk about what that looks like at the high school. Maybe Mr. Clavin talk about what that looks like at the middle school too, as well as at the K-5 level. So good point, good question.
Well, I'm kind of wondering what the remote learning model would look like. I mean, we wouldn't be planning on having a teacher out there for every course just to do that course, right? I mean, we would have there's a curriculum that's already out there that we could have a dedicated teacher who works with students who maybe are struggling or have questions or help them, but they won't actually have to instruct the course, will they?
I think it could look a lot different at the high school, and I think there's a couple different ways to handle that. So I think it's unlikely that every high school student who's going to be remote is going to do the exact same thing. I think we're probably looking at some sort of combination of a virtual learning course that's probably not taught by one of our teachers, but through a program like the Illinois Virtual School. There may be situations where one of our own teachers teaches multiple sections of the same class, but we can put all of the remote learners into one section. So they're not doing both anymore. They're doing the in-person learners for multiple sections and then perhaps one section of just remote only. So they're not trying to balance the two. I think that's a possibility and something that's been kicked around a little bit. So at the high school, because you've got so many different classes and the master schedule gets so much more complex, I think we're probably looking at multiple ways to meet student needs. But I think there's a way to do that, especially based on some of the initial conversations that we've had. I think there's a way to do that and not ask teachers to do both the way that we've done this year.
Oh, I agree. I think we need to actually allow teachers to go back to the classroom and teach in the classroom without worrying about remote. But I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think remote's going to be like a smooth, uniform kind of a system. It's going to be different options and different possibilities and different pathways for different numbers of students. I mean, like you say, I think there probably won't be any two students that have exactly the same pathway. So, I mean, because I think we get in our minds kind of a preconceived idea that, okay, well, remote learning is going to look the way it looks now, where we just do the classroom curriculum, but we just have a separate teacher doing that. So I'm not envisioning that kind of a system as we go forward. I mean, there may be for some classes, as you say.
Yeah.
But there are going to be a lot of other pathways, and I think some. You know, we did some of this remote learning before pandemic, so you know, there were ways to do that, and now I think we'll just have maybe some more dedicated teachers who can help students who are taking that pathway to succeed, you know, as they go along. So, you know, I think as a model going forward, I don't see that we would ever really look back. I would think we would keep developing that and developing those choices and pathways as best we can going forward.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And I don't think remote learning in 3 years will look the way it's going to next year.
No, I'm sure it won't. Yeah.
And I think you could, the same as you go up 5 years and 7 years and 10 years, we'll continue to grow. I would agree with what Mr. Carlson said earlier. We don't want to lose those innovations. Let's continue to kind of push ourselves out of our comfort zone, see what we can offer, give. And again, some staff come to us and are willing to try something different and just kind of seeking permission. We've learned a lot over the last year, and I think allowing teachers to try new things and take some risks is a good thing. So we're working on what that looks like. You know, ultimately we'll have a presentation for the board, and that'll be a conversation in terms of what remote learning looks like.
Yeah, you know, sometimes good can come even out of bad, and I think this is a bad situation that will give birth to a lot of good opportunity for us in terms of the future and the growth of our abilities within the district. So
I agree.
That's the way I think we have to view it.
Steve, do you have an idea of when we're going to require parents to notify us of that election?
I don't yet. I'd like to finalize some of these things first so I can develop that timeline. I would like that to happen. It's got to happen before the end of the school year so we can make plans before we leave. My hope is that by the end of the month, I could have a much better plan and presentation for the board, probably at the April 27th meeting, that we can share with the community and then start that process so that sometime in early to mid-May, parents are going to have to make that decision and at least inform us of what they're dealing with and in the circumstances if they don't have the documentation already. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, or should, okay, we'll move on to.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. I needed a drink, so I was ready to move on. Yeah, that ends the superintendent's
We'll move on. Open discussion and future agenda items. Any discussion items that people want to bring up? Issues, observations, questions? Future agenda items, we've already kind of talked about some.
One thing I'll throw out for maybe some quick conversation is just location. You know, this last transition, I think the waters have calmed a little bit. And as we continue to share information about next year, hopefully it continues to be calm. We can continue meeting here in this space, but we'll just remind everybody to be thinking about when we might be ready to transition back to perhaps the middle school and the collaboration area. That was full of a lot of furniture a couple of weeks ago that I'm sure there's still some there, but it's probably a lot emptier than it used to be. So that would be an option. We can still record and then air meetings there. Maybe different quality, it will be different quality. But I would just ask the board to continue thinking about that, and whether that's the 27th or sometime in May when we're ready to transition back to the normal middle school environment.
I would assume that means we could still host attendees live. You know, if I was a person in the community attendee, you could still come and actually.
Be recorded, he said, yeah.
So no one would be able to come.
Oh, you could.
You could still come, right?
Be in the.
Yeah, you'd still be in the audience. We'd still.
Not virtually, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, just in terms of an actual seating area, how many would we be able to accommodate there, as opposed to obviously a large auditorium like this? Something does pop up.
Sure.
Yeah, what would be?
Or I'm just somebody who I'm now engaged with this. Like I've been watching this. You know, I've heard from parents like I watch every single week. Like maybe that might be somebody that's like, hey, you know what? I'll just go.
So that target has moved a little bit already, and I'm going to say this, and David, if I get it wrong, please remind me. If the space holds 200 people or less, the limit is 50 people. If the space, like the auditorium, holds more than 200, then it's 25% capacity limit. So we need to, if we were going to use the collaboration area at the middle school, I need to go over with Mr. Clavin, probably with Mr. Ekstrom, take a look at it, see what the seating capacity is, and then figure out if it's greater than 200, then what does that 25% capacity look like?
Sure.
Otherwise, it would still be limited at 50 for now.
Sure.
You know, as we transition into this bridge transition that's been talked about, and then into phase 5, obviously that's going to change. So yeah, we would need to determine what space we want to use and then what the capacity limit is at that space.
Sure.
We've only had one meeting that we got close to that capacity limit anyway, as I recall, in here. So.
In here, but.
Yeah, but it was still.
Move over there, it'll be a much smaller capacity.
No, but it was still 50 here then, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so 50 is the number.
And if we start holding meetings back at the middle school, doesn't mean we can't come back here if we anticipate a topic that is going to draw a larger crowd.
Sure.
Well, does anybody have any problem with scheduling the next meeting at the middle school then?
Nope, I prefer it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Why don't we do that? Otherwise, we've talked about this now for a long time. And it's one of those issues that we haven't moved on, so let's make the move.
We'll plan the April 27th regular meeting at the collaboration area at the middle school.
So everybody remember that, don't show up here.
There's a meeting.
I'm likely to do that, so.
I assume Kathy will send out a reminder.
Oh, and a quick reminder, there is a board admin retreat next Tuesday, the 20th.
Out at the middle school.
I think we all know that now.
We're all
Just heard about that. Just heard about that a couple hours ago. An hour ago.
And that'll be here in the library? Or we don't?
Well, we had planned to do it in the library here, but we could probably use the collaboration area at the middle school for that as well.
Whatever is more,
I think
whatever's
one
conducive to your.
I think either one's going to be the same, so let's just plan on doing that one at the middle school as well.
Okay.
Got to change that in my calendar now. Or else we'll put the wrong place.
Any other future agenda items or open discussion items? Is there a motion to go into executive session for the consideration of matters related to the appointment, employment, or dismissal of personnel, purchase or lease of real estate, negotiations, and imminent litigation?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call?
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Wren?
Yes.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, we'll go into executive session and then return hopefully shortly for our final votes. All right. Is there a motion to approve the resolution authorizing dismissal of part-time educational support personnel as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Nelson?
Yes.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Ren, sorry.
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Is there a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Ren?
Yes.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Is there a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding regarding evaluation procedures for certified staff during the 2020-2021 school year?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Ren?
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.